They say the deadliest poison is the one that comes from your own blood. I used to think that no matter what happened in life, your family would always be your shelter, your last safe place. But what do you do when that shelter collapses? When the people you gave life to become the ones who break you? Good afternoon, my dears. My name is Betty, and I'm speaking to you today from my little kitchen in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm 72 years old, a mother of 6, a baker by trade, and a woman who's lived through things I wouldn't wish on anyone. But this isn't just a story about pain. It's about survival. About love that refuses to die, even when it's torn apart. And about starting over when you thought your life was already over. Before we begin, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. Whether you're watching from a small town or a busy city or even from overseas, know this. This story, though deeply personal, may hold a reflection of something you felt. Because many of us at some point in our lives are hurt by those closest to us. And many of us carry silent wounds no one sees. This is not a dramatization. This is not a movie. This is a true story, a painful, raw, unfiltered truth of a mother, her family, and the day love was tested in ways she never imagined. But more than anything, this is a story of healing. Of finding peace not in perfection, but in perseverance. And of rediscovering life's sweetness, even after the bitterest betrayal. So make yourself a cup of tea or coffee or whatever brings you comfort. And if you've ever felt like your life has shattered beyond repair, I hope you find in this story a reminder that broken things can still be beautiful. Let's go back to where it all began. A dusty town in rural Kentucky where I first learned what it meant to love, to work hard, and to dream. Before everything changed. I was born in 1953 in a small town you've probably never heard of, Millerville, Kentucky. It was a dot on the map, where church bells rang on Sundays and neighbors still borrowed sugar from one another without knocking. Life was hard, but it was honest. We lived in a one-room wooden house with a tin roof and a dirt floor. And when it rained, Lord have mercy, that floor turned to mud. I used to help my mama lay down old potato sacks just to keep our feet dry. We didn't have much, but we never felt poor. Because what we did have was each other. My father, George, worked the land like it was a part of his body. He planted corn, beans, potatoes, whatever would grow. He'd come home with his hands cracked and dirty, but always full of stories. He never raised his voice, not once. And every single night, no matter how tired he was, he'd kiss my mother on the forehead and thank her for the meal she made. That's the kind of love I was raised on, quiet, steady, and strong like oak. Mama Mary was the rock of our home. She taught me everything from how to sew on a button to how to bake cornbread from scratch. But more than chores, she taught me values. Daughter, she used to say, a woman needs to know how to stand on her own 2 feet. Life don't always give you someone to lean on. And I took that to heart. We had no TV, no telephone, no car. Entertainment was catching fireflies in a jar, or listening to the grown-ups talk on the porch as the crickets chirped in the fields. But those simple moments? They shaped who I became. They taught me to find joy in little things and meaning in hard work. Sometimes I think about how fast today's world moves. Kids with smartphones, parents with calendars full of activities. I'm not saying one way is better than the other, but I do wonder if we've forgotten how powerful stillness can be. How valuable it is to sit around a dinner table and talk, really talk. The lessons I learned on that dirt floor, respect, resilience, faith, and family, would become the very foundation I tried to build my own home on years later. I believe that if I raised my children with those same values, they'd turn out all right. But life, as I'd come to learn, doesn't always follow the rules you set for it. Still, those early years, they gave me hope. They gave me strength. And when the storms of life came, I held onto those childhood roots like a tree gripping the earth. Because no matter how far life takes you, a part of your soul always stays on that front porch, listening to the crickets, and remembering where it all began. I was 16 when the drought came. It was the kind of drought that doesn't just dry up crops, it dries up hope. One by one, our rows of beans, corn, and sweet potatoes withered into dust. My daddy tried everything, extra watering, even prayers whispered at the break of dawn, but the rain never came. And when the land goes quiet like that, you start to realize, maybe it's time to move on. So we packed what little we had into 2 cardboard suitcases, one for clothes, one for Mama's preserves and my quilt, and boarded a Greyhound bus headed west. Los Angeles. I didn't even know how to spell it back then, but I knew what it meant, opportunity. People said that city was made of dreams and we needed one. I remember staring out the window the entire ride, watching green fields turn into deserts, then suburbs, then buildings taller than any tree I'd ever seen. The bus was loud, babies crying, people chatting, someone humming a gospel tune, but in my head it was quiet. I was saying goodbye to a life I'd known for 16 years. We arrived in LA in the summer of 1969. The heat hit different, thicker, louder, almost alive. The city buzzed with movement. Cars honked, people shouted, music spilled from open windows. It was thrilling and terrifying. Our first home was a tiny apartment in South Central, just one room with a thin curtain splitting the bedroom from the living room. We shared a bathroom with 4 other families. The neighbors were kind but tired. Most were like us, folks who had come looking for a better life and found a hard one instead. My daddy found work at a construction site. Mama took in ironing and sold sweet tea out of mason jars. I got a part-time job cleaning offices after school. We hustled every single day. But what struck me most wasn't just the work, it was the pace. The city never slowed down. In Kentucky, time had a rhythm: sunrise, chores, dinner, rest. In LA, it felt like you were always catching up. Yet, there was something beautiful in that struggle. Something sacred in knowing we were building a new life from the ground up. Piece by piece. Meal by meal. Dollar by dollar. I still remembered the first time I saw palm trees lit up by the sunset casting long shadows over the cracked sidewalk. It wasn't Kentucky, but it was ours. And in that tiny apartment, with the sound of distant sirens and neighbors arguing through the walls, I made a quiet promise. Someday I would build a home of my own. A home filled with warmth, safety, and the kind of love that could weather any storm. But dreams don't always come true the way you expect. And sometimes they take you down roads you never meant to travel. At first, South Central felt like any other working-class neighborhood. Tight spaces, noisy streets, and neighbors who looked out for each other. There were block parties on weekends, gospel music floating from open windows, and kids playing jump rope on the sidewalk with bare feet and big laughs. But underneath that rhythm of life was something else, something heavier. By the mid-1970s, we started hearing names we didn't recognize: Crips, Bloods, Skull Crew. At first, they were just rumors. Street boys, folks would say, trying to act tough. But then the sirens came more often. And late at night, we'd hear gunshots not in movies, not on the news, but right outside our window. My boys were still small back then. They pressed their faces against the glass, watching teenagers ride past on bikes, bandanas hanging from their pockets. Who are they, Mama? Just kids, baby, I'd say, pulling them away. But deep down, I worried. Because I knew how easy it was for good boys to get pulled into bad company, especially when those boys seemed to have money, confidence, and respect that hard-working families like ours couldn't always provide. You see, poverty doesn't just hurt your wallet. It eats at your hope. When you're working 3 jobs and still can't afford your kids' shoes. When schools are underfunded and full of tired teachers. When grocery stores sell more liquor than fruit. That's when the promises start to feel broken. America told us that if we worked hard, we'd get ahead. But in South Central, too many families were working themselves to the bone and barely surviving. And that's where the gangs came in with open arms. They offered a twisted version of what every young man wants: belonging, protection, and a sense of power. They said, your parents can't save you. The system doesn't care. But we got you. It was seductive. And dangerous. I remember the first time my oldest son, Mark, came home with a black eye and didn't want to talk about it. Then it was skipped classes. Then it was new sneakers I knew I hadn't bought. It felt like watching a tide pull him out to sea while I stood frozen on the shore. I tried curfews, tried punishment, tried prayer. But sometimes love isn't enough. Especially when the streets are louder than your voice at home. And that's the truth people don't always want to admit. It's not just bad parenting. It's a broken system. A neglected community. A cycle too many families have been trapped in with no easy way out. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Because I believed, with every ounce of me, that love and the right values could still bring my boys back. What I didn't know was that the storm was just beginning. And it would take more than love to survive what came next. Raising children has always been a balancing act between holding on and letting go, between setting rules and showing love. And when you're raising kids in a tough neighborhood like South Central, that balance gets even harder to find. Richard and I believed in old-school parenting. He worked double shifts, came home exhausted, and still managed to check in on homework. I cooked, cleaned, and made sure our house had structure even if outside those doors, chaos ruled the streets. We thought discipline meant love. That if we were strict, if we set clear rules, our boys would stay on track. No phones at the table. Be home before dark. Say yes, sir, and no, ma'am. And for a while it worked. But kids grow fast. And so do the shadows around them. By the time Mark turned 15, I could feel him pulling away. He wasn't just ignoring curfew, he was shutting me out. "Why you always in my business?" he snapped once when I asked about his friends. And my heart broke a little. Because I wasn't trying to control him, I was trying to protect him. That's the tightrope parents walk, isn't it? Discipline too hard, and you risk pushing them further away. Too soft, and the world pulls them in with promises you can't compete with. Looking back, I wonder if we confused control with connection. We gave orders when we should have asked questions. We lectured when we should have listened. And maybe, just maybe, we were afraid. Afraid that if we looked too closely, we'd have to face the truth. Our boys were changing. And not in the way we had hoped. I remember one night, after Mark had been gone all weekend, I sat at the edge of his bed, waiting. I was so ready to shout, to punish, to make him feel the weight of his choices. But when the door finally opened and he walked in, eyes glazed, shirt stained, smelling like smoke, I didn't yell. I just said, "Are you okay?" He didn't answer. He just brushed past me, like I was invisible. And that's when I realized something painful. Rules only matter when there's still relationship. And somewhere along the way we had started losing that. In today's world, it's easy to blame the parents. You should have been stricter. You weren't present enough. But the truth is far more complicated. We were there. We gave them love, food, a roof, guidance. But sometimes the streets are louder than a mother's voice. And the mistakes don't come from one moment, they come from 100 small silences. Still, I wasn't ready to give up on them. Not then. Not ever. Because no matter how far they drifted, I still believed they could find their way back home. But the further they went, the harder it became to see that path. There's a kind of pain that words can't reach. It doesn't come all at once like a storm, it creeps in slowly like fog. One day you're kissing your boy goodnight after a long day of school and cartoons. And then one night, you're locking your bedroom door, afraid of the sound of his footsteps. That's the part no one prepares you for when your own child starts to feel like a stranger. It began subtly. Mark stopped coming to church with us on Sundays. Said he was tired or had something more important. Then came the missing cash from my purse, the smell of smoke in the laundry, the bruises on his knuckles. And I kept telling myself, he's just lost. Just going through a phase. He'll come around. But in my heart, I knew something deeper had changed. It wasn't just Mark. Frank and Charlie started following his lead. Their grades dropped. They'd come home late, eyes darting, talking back like we were the problem. And the home we'd worked so hard to build, the safe place, the warm kitchen, the prayers before dinner, suddenly felt like a house full of landmines. One evening, I found a small bag of powder in Mark's jacket pocket while doing laundry. I stood in the bathroom, door locked, just staring at it in my hand. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to cry. But mostly, I just felt numb. Because this wasn't the boy I taught to tie his shoes, the one who used to crawl into my bed when it thundered. Richard and I argued that night. He said I was too soft. That I kept making excuses. I said he was too harsh. That yelling only pushed them further. But truthfully, we were both scared. Scared of who our sons were becoming and scared of what it meant about us. Were we bad parents? Did we love them too much? Or not enough? Were we fools to believe that hard work and prayer could hold a family together in a world built to tear it apart? Trust isn't something that breaks with a single act. It erodes. With every lie, every slammed door, every look of resentment from across the dinner table. Until one day you realize you don't recognize the eyes staring back at you. And worse, you're not sure they recognize yours either. I still set their plates at dinner. Still prayed for them every night. But inside, I started mourning them, like they were gone, even though they were still under my roof. And nothing prepares a mother for that. The hardest part wasn't the fear. It was the silence that followed it. And that silence was about to be shattered in the most devastating way. It was a Thursday night in September. One of those nights that starts off just like any other. The smell of dinner still lingered in the air, rice, collard greens, and a bit of leftover chicken. Christine was at a friend's house working on a school project. Richard had just left for a night shift at the factory. I was alone, washing dishes. The radio played softly in the background, an old gospel tune, the kind my mama used to hum when folding laundry. Then I heard it. The gate slammed. Hard. Then footsteps. Heavy. Unsteady. Then laughter, loud, slurred, and mean. And I knew. They were home. Not the boys I raised, but the men they had become. The front door creaked open. Bottles clinked. The smell of whiskey and something else, bitter, chemical, filled the house. Mark's voice boomed from the hallway. "Where's the old man?" I froze. My hands still wet, heart racing. They were drunk. Maybe high. Their voices overlapped, taunting, wild, like strangers in a bar fight. Then the kitchen door swung open, and there he was, my firstborn. His eyes bloodshot, shirt stained, jaw clenched. "You think you're better than us, Mama?" he spat. "Always judging, always praying. But what did it get you?" "Huh? Nothing." I tried to stay calm. "Baby, please sit down. Let me make you something to eat." "I'm not hungry," he snapped, slamming his fist on the table so hard the silverware jumped. I looked into his eyes, and I didn't see my son. I saw someone broken. Angry. Lost. The others followed behind. Frank, Charlie, Wesley, Thomas. All 5 of them. The air was thick with tension. I could feel my knees weakening, but I stood my ground. Because when you're a mother, even fear takes a backseat to love. I tried to remind them. "You were raised better than this. We gave you everything we could. Food. A home. Love." And that's when Mark looked at me with something colder than hate. "No, Mama. You gave us nothing but rules and fairy tales. The world out there? That's real. What happened next?" I won't repeat in detail. Not because I can't, but because some things are too cruel to say out loud. All I can tell you is, by the time they left, I was on the floor. My body bruised. My spirit torn. And everything I believed about motherhood, about family, lay in pieces around me. They were my sons. And they had done the unthinkable. Christine came home later that night. She found me there. And the look in her eyes, that mixture of horror, heartbreak, and helplessness, I'll never forget. That night didn't just break my body. It shattered the last pieces of the hope I had for my boys. And it marked the beginning of a different kind of survival. Christine didn't say a word that night. She found me curled on the kitchen floor, my apron stained with blood, one shoe missing, my hands shaking like leaves in a storm. She knelt beside me, her voice barely above a whisper, "Mama, who did this?" I couldn't answer. Because how do you say out loud that the same hands you once held at birth were the hands that just broke you? She helped me to the bedroom, sat by my side the whole night. Didn't cry. Didn't speak. She just held my hand, and I remember thinking, she's stronger than I ever knew. But silence, my dears, doesn't always mean strength. Sometimes it's a scream buried so deep it can't find its way out. In the days that followed, Christine kept up the routine. Went to school. Did the dishes. Said, "Yes, ma'am," and "No, sir." But she moved like a shadow. Eyes hollow. Smile gone. I thought she was coping. But what I didn't know was that silence was hiding something even more painful. Weeks later, as we sat together folding laundry, she asked, "Mama, do you think people can change who they are, deep down?" I turned to her, surprised. "Of course I do, baby." She stared at the towel in her lap. "Even after they've done something really awful?" That was when I felt the first chill in my spine. A mother knows when her child is holding something in. And later that night, it came out, slowly in pieces, through sobs she had kept hidden for years. She told me that Mark and the others had hurt her too. Not just that night, but before. Many times. Threats. Shame. Fear. She never told me because she didn't want to break what was left of our family. My heart shattered all over again. How could I not have seen it? How could I have been there, every day, and missed the pain in my own daughter's eyes? But that's the cruel trick of trauma. Sometimes the victims you see the least are hurting the most. Christine wasn't just a bystander. She was a secondary survivor, the one left behind in the ruins, forced to carry the silence of others. And that silence almost swallowed her whole. We got her into therapy. Dr. Marina, a gentle, warm woman, began to slowly help Christine rebuild her sense of self, like gluing together broken porcelain. She said Christine was brave, that the act of surviving and finally speaking was itself a kind of victory. And she was right. You see, sometimes the loudest act of courage is breaking a silence that never should have been there in the first place. There is a moment when even love must let go. It's not something anyone teaches you, not in church, not in school, not in any parenting book. Because no one wants to imagine that one day, you might have to walk away from your own children. But that's the place life brought us to. After Christine told me everything, I stayed up the entire night. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't cry. I just sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker and fade with the dawn. When Richard came home, I told him. At first, he was quiet. Too quiet. Then he stood up and walked out of the room without a word. I heard the shed door slam behind him. He didn't come back for hours. When he finally returned, he sat in the living room with a machete in his lap, the same one he used to clear the backyard. He didn't say a thing. He just sat there. I think that was his way of making peace with what he felt inside: rage, shame, and loss. "They're not our sons anymore," he whispered, barely looking at me. And I understood. Not because I agreed, but because I had no answer to give him. How do you report your own children to the police? How do you call them criminals when you once called them baby and wiped jelly off their cheeks? But how do you stay silent when the one daughter who did everything right is now shattered because of it? People talk about forgiveness like it's holy. And maybe it is. But forgiveness is not the same as tolerance. It's not allowing abuse to fester just because it came wrapped in the skin of someone you once gave birth to. The truth is, we didn't have a choice. If we stayed, we'd be choosing fear. If we stayed, we'd be choosing silence. If we stayed, we'd be betraying Christine all over again. So we left. Not in a blaze of anger, not with slamming doors or packed boxes in the rain. We left quietly. A friend of Richard's offered us a small place out of town. A chance to disappear. To start again. And we took it. People may judge us. They may say, "How could you abandon your own blood?" But what they don't see is what blood can become when it turns dark. When it poisons every corner of your home. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the bravest act of protection a parent can do. And as painful as it was to leave them behind. That was the night we chose life over legacy. Peace over shame. And the daughter who still called us mom and dad over the sons who no longer remembered what those words meant. Starting over isn't as romantic as it sounds. It's not sunsets in fresh coffee and instant peace. It's heavy boxes, long silences, unfamiliar streets, and the echo of what you left behind following you like a shadow. Our new home was small, tucked behind a gas station in a sleepy town where no one knew our names. And that was the gift. Christine enrolled in school again. Richard found work fixing engines at a local mechanic shop. And me? Well, I stood in that tiny kitchen for days, not knowing what to do with my hands. Until one morning I woke up early, opened the pantry, and pulled out a bag of flour. I baked a batch of cornbread. Then a tray of lemon cookies. Then a pound cake, just like Mama used to make. It started as a way to fill the silence, but slowly something began to shift. Neighbors stopped by, drawn by the smell. Christine's teachers asked for recipes. Richard came home and smiled, really smiled for the first time in weeks when he found banana bread cooling on the windowsill. Without planning it, I had started a tiny bakery right in our living room. They started calling me Grandma Betty even though I wasn't anyone's grandma just yet. At first it made me laugh. Then it made me proud. Because behind that name was something I hadn't felt in a long time: warmth, safety, belonging. And the act of baking, kneading dough, measuring sugar, watching something rise in the oven, it became more than routine. It became healing. Each batch of cookies was a quiet rebellion against the pain. Each pie crust rolled out was a layer of memory I chose to reframe. Not erase because I could never erase what happened, but transform it. Turn it into something that could nourish, not destroy. People often ask me how I forgave myself, how I kept going after everything. And the truth is, I didn't have a grand epiphany. There was no lightning bolt, no aha moment. Just butter, sugar, flour, and the steady rhythm of life being rebuilt, one tray of hope at a time. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from big moments. It comes from small, quiet acts of care repeated day after day until one morning you realize you're not just surviving anymore. You're living. And that, my dears, is how Grandma Betty was born. Healing comes in waves. Some days it washes over you like sunlight on your skin. Other days it pulls you under like a riptide, and you don't even realize you're drowning until it's too late. We were doing better. Christine was smiling again, even laughing sometimes. I was selling pies out of our kitchen window. Richard, he worked long hours, came home dusty, tired, but present. Until one afternoon, everything changed. A knock at the door. An envelope. No name, just a few photos inside. And the first one are boys. All 5 of them, sitting on a porch somewhere, older now, rougher. The kind of faces you wouldn't recognize if you hadn't once kissed their foreheads goodnight. The second photo, worse. It was Christine, years ago, blurred, caught mid-step. And on the back, scribbled in red ink, still watching. I dropped the envelope. When Richard saw it, something shifted behind his eyes. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just disappeared. That night, he didn't come home. The next night either. And then, 2 days later, he walked through the front door, quiet, calm, and smelling faintly of cigarettes, a habit he'd quit 20 years earlier. "They won't be coming back," he said. His voice was flat. Final. I didn't ask what he meant. Somewhere deep inside, I already knew. Later, I found out, through whispers, through Mr. Johnson, through the way Christine's shoulders loosened when she walked outside for the first time without looking over her shoulder. Richard had found them. Or rather, he had paid someone to find them. Not to kill, but to send a message. And the message had been delivered loud, brutal, and unforgettable. That night, as we sat in silence, he stared out the window, eyes distant. "I did what I had to do," he muttered. "They stopped being our sons the moment they hurt you. The moment they hurt her." I didn't argue. But I didn't comfort him either. Because when you cross that line, even for love, you don't come back the same. I still saw the man I married. But now he carried a darkness. Not evil, no. Just weight. The weight of doing what good men aren't supposed to do. People say revenge doesn't heal anything. And maybe that's true. But when justice fails and the law turns its back on your pain, what are you left with? Richard chose to draw his own line in the sand. And once you do that, you either live with the consequences, or you spend the rest of your life running from them. He didn't run. He stayed. But I could see it every day in his eyes. The part of him that never fully returned. People often ask me, "Did you ever forgive them?" And I never quite know how to answer. Because forgiveness isn't a door you walk through and suddenly feel lighter. It's a long road full of stones, some sharp, some smooth, some so heavy you have to sit down for a while and catch your breath. I never saw my sons again after we left. Rumors reached us now and then, prison, rehab, more violence. Sometimes I'd imagine them as little boys again, running through the yard, laughing over nothing at all. Then I'd remember the silence that followed the night they hurt me, hurt her, and that image would vanish like smoke. I didn't hate them. But I couldn't love them the same either. And that's what people don't understand. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to let the past rot inside you. Christine once asked me, "If they showed up today, what would you do?" I looked her in the eye and said, "I would not open the door, but I would pray they found peace." Because forgiveness for me wasn't about them. It was about us. It was about reclaiming joy, not erasing pain. About learning to live with scars without carrying shame. Our family rebuilt itself, different, smaller, but strong. Christine finished school, became a nurse, married a gentleman with kind eyes and steady hands. They gave me 2 grandbabies, one loud and full of mischief, the other quiet like his mama used to be. Richard softened again in his later years. He never spoke much of what he did, but he never ran from it either. He held my hand in church, watched sunsets without saying a word, and made sure there was always gas in my car, even when I barely left the house. And me? I became Grandma Betty. Not just a name on a bakery sign, but a woman who had been broken and rebuilt herself, batter by batter, pie by pie, prayer by prayer. So if you're listening to this and carrying something heavy, grief, guilt, silence, shame, I want you to know. You are not what happened to you. You are not what they did. You are the way you kept going. The way you refused to let pain define your future. Some stories don't have happy endings, but they can still have meaningful ones. We don't need to be whole to be worthy of love. Sometimes the beauty is in the cracks, the parts that let the light in. Thank you for listening to mine.